Chapter 44 of Pushing to the Front by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 44. The next time you think you are a failure. If you made a botch of last year, if you feel that it was a failure, that you floundered and blundered and did a lot of foolish things, if you were gullible, made imprudent investments, wasted your time and money, don't drag these ghosts along with you to handicap you and destroy your happiness all through the future. Haven't you wasted enough energy worrying over what cannot be helped? Don't let these things sap any more of your vitality, waste any more of your time, or destroy any more of your happiness. There is only one thing to do with bitter experiences, blunders, and unfortunate mistakes, or with memories that worry us and which kill our efficiency, and that is to forget them, bury them. Today is a good time to leave the low-vaulted past, to drop the yesterdays, to forget bitter memories. Resolve that you will close the door on everything in the past that pains and cannot help you. Free yourself from everything which handicaps you, keeps you back, and makes you unhappy. Throw away all useless baggage. Drop everything that is a drag, that hinders your progress. Enter upon tomorrow with a clean slate and a free mind. Don't be mortgaged to the past, and never look back. There is no use in castigating yourself for not having done better. Form a habit of expelling from your mind thoughts or suggestions which call up unpleasant subjects or bitter memories, and which have a bad influence upon you. Everyone ought to make it a life rule to wipe out from his memory everything that has been unpleasant, unfortunate. We ought to forget everything that has kept us back, has made us suffer, has been disagreeable, and never allow the hideous pictures of distressing conditions to enter our minds again. There is only one thing to do with a disagreeable, harmful experience, and that is, forget it. There are many times in the life of a person who does things that are worthwhile when he gets terribly discouraged and thinks it easier to go back than to push on. But there is no victory in retreating. We should never leave any bridges unburned behind us, any way open for retreat to tempt our weakness, indecision, or discouragement. If there is anything we ever feel grateful for, it is that we have had courage and pluck enough to push on, to keep going when things looked dark and when seemingly insurmountable obstacles confronted us. Most people are their worst enemies. We are all the time queering our life game by our vicious, tearing down thoughts and unfortunate moods. Everything depends upon our courage, our faith in ourselves, in our holding a hopeful, optimistic outlook. And yet, whenever things go wrong with us, whenever we have a discouraging day or an unfortunate experience, a loss, or any misfortune, we let the tearing down thought, doubt, fear, despondency, like a bull in a china shop, tear through our mentalities, perhaps breaking up and destroying the work of years of building up, and we have to start all over again. We work and live like the frog in the well. We climb up only to fall back, and often lose all we gain. One of the worst things that can ever happen to a person is to get it into his head that he was born unlucky and that the fates are against him. There are no fates outside of our own mentality. We are our own fates. We control our own destiny. There is no fate or destiny which puts one man down and another up. It is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. He only is beaten who admits it. The man is inferior who admits that he is inferior, who voluntarily takes an inferior position because he thinks the best things were intended for somebody else. You will find that just in proportion as you increase your confidence in yourself by the affirmation of what you wish to be and to do, your ability will increase. No matter what other people may think about your ability, never allow yourself to doubt that you can do or become what you long to. Increase your self-confidence in every possible way, and you can do this to a remarkable degree by the power of self-suggestion. This form of suggestion, talking to oneself vigorously, earnestly, seems to arouse the sleeping forces in the subconscious self more effectually than thinking the same thing. There is a force in words spoken aloud, which is not stirred by going over the same words mentally. They sometimes arouse slumbering energies within us, which thinking does not stir up, especially if we have not been trained to think deeply, to focus the mind closely. They make a more lasting impression upon the mind, just as words which pass through the eye from the printed page make a greater impression on the brain than we get by thinking the same words, as seeing objects of nature makes a more lasting impression upon the mind than thinking about them. A vividness, a certain force, accompanies the spoken word, especially if earnestly, vehemently uttered, which is not apparent to many in merely thinking about what the words express. If you repeat a firm resolve to yourself aloud, vigorously, even vehemently, you are more likely to carry it to reality than if you merely resolve in silence. We become so accustomed to our silent thoughts that the voicing of them, the giving audible expression to our yearnings, makes a much deeper impression upon us. The audible self-encouragement treatment may be used with marvelous results in correcting our weaknesses, overcoming our deficiencies. Never allow yourself to think meanly, narrowly, poorly of yourself. Never regard yourself as weak, inefficient, diseased, but as perfect, complete, capable. Never even think of the possibility of going through life a failure or a partial failure. Failure and misery are not for the man who has seen the God side of himself, who has been in touch with divinity. They are for those who have never discovered themselves and their godlike qualities. Stoutly assert that there is a place for you in the world and that you are going to fill it like a man. Train yourself to expect great things of yourself. Never admit, even by your manner, that you think you are destined to do little things all your life. It is marvelous what mental strength can be developed by the perpetual affirmation of vigorous fitness, strength, power, efficiency. These are thoughts and ideals that make a strong man. The way to get the best out of yourself is to put things right up to yourself, handle yourself without gloves, and talk to yourself as you would to a son of yours who has great ability, but who is not using half of it. When you go into an undertaking, just say to yourself, "Now this thing is right up to me. I've got to make good, to show the man in me, or the coward. There is no backing out." You will be surprised to see how quickly this sort of self-suggestion will brace you up and put new spirit in you. I have a friend who has helped himself wonderfully by talking to himself about his conduct. When he feels that he is not doing all that he ought to, that he has made some foolish mistake or has failed to use good sense and good judgment in any transaction, when he feels that his stamina and ambition are deteriorating, he goes off alone to the country, to the woods if possible, and has a good heart-to-heart talk with himself something after this fashion: "Now, young man, you need a good talking to, a bracing up all along the line. You are going stale, your standards are dropping, your ideals are getting dull, and the worst of it all is that when you do a poor job, or are careless about your dress and indifferent in your manner, you do not feel as troubled as you used to. You are not making good. This lethargy, this inertia, this indifference will seriously cripple your career if you're not very careful. You are letting a lot of good chances slip by you because you are not as progressive and up to date as you ought to be. In short, you are becoming lazy. You like to take things easy. Nobody ever amounts to much who lets his energies flag, his standards droop, and his ambition oozle out. Now I am going to keep right after you, young man, until you are doing yourself justice. This take it easy sort of policy will never land you at the goal you started for. You will have to watch yourself very closely, or you will be left behind. You are capable of something much better than what you are doing. You must start out today with a firm resolve to make the returns from your work greater tonight than ever before. You must make this a red-letter day. Bestir yourself. Get the cobwebs out of your head. Brush off the brain ash. Think, think, think to some purpose. Do not mull and mope like this. You are only half alive, man. Get a move on you. This young man says that every morning when he finds his standards are down, and he feels lazy and indifferent, he hauls himself over the coals, as he calls it, in order to force himself up to a higher standard and put himself in tune for the day. 'Tis the very first thing he attends to. He forces himself to do the most disagreeable tasks first, and does not allow himself to skip hard problems. Now, don't be a coward, he says to himself. If others have done this, you can do it. By years of stern discipline of this kind, he has done wonders with himself. He began as a poor boy living in the slums of New York, with no one to take an interest in him, encourage or push him. Though he had little opportunity for schooling when he was a small boy, he has given himself a splendid education, mainly since he was 21. I have never known anyone else who carried on such a vigorous campaign in self-victory, self-development, self-training, self-culture, as this young man has. At first it may seem silly to you to be talking to yourself, but you will derive so much benefit from it that you will have recourse to it in remedying all your defects. There is no fault, however great or small, which will not succumb to persistent audible suggestion. For example, you may be naturally timid and shrink from meeting people, and you may distrust your own ability. If so, you will be greatly helped by assuring yourself in your daily self-talks that you are not timid, that, on the contrary, you are the embodiment of courage and bravery. Assure yourself that there is no reason why you should be timid, because there is nothing inferior or peculiar about you, that you are attractive, and that you know how to act in the presence of others. Say to yourself that you are never again going to allow yourself to harbor any thoughts of self-depreciation or timidity or inferiority, that you are going to hold your head up and go about as though you were a king, a conqueror, instead of crawling about like a whipped cur. You are going to assert your manhood, your individuality. If you lack initiative, stoutly affirm your ability to begin things and to push them to a finish, and always put your resolve into action at the first opportunity. You will be surprised to see how you can increase your courage, your confidence, and your ability, if you will be sincere with yourself and strong and persistent in your affirmations. I know of nothing so helpful for the timid, those who lack faith in themselves, as the habit of constantly affirming their own importance, their own power, their own divinity. The trouble is that we do not think half enough of ourselves. We do not accurately measure our ability, do not put the right estimate upon our possibilities. We berate ourselves, belittle, efface ourselves, because we do not see the larger, diviner man in us. Try this experiment the very next time you get discouraged or think that you are a failure, that your work does not amount to much. Turn about face. Resolve that you will go no further in that direction. Stop and face the other way, and go the other way. Every time you think you are a failure, it helps you to become one, for your thought is your life pattern, and you cannot get away from it. You cannot get away from your ideals, the standard which you hold for yourself. And if you acknowledge in your thought that you are a failure, that you can't do anything worthwhile, that luck is against you, that you don't have the same opportunity that other people have, your convictions will control the result. There are thousands of people who have lost everything they valued in the world, all the material results of their life's endeavor, and yet because they possessed stout hearts, unconquerable spirits, a determination to push ahead which knows no retreat, they are just as far from real failure as before their loss, and with such wealth they can never be poor. A great many people fail to reach a success which matches their ability because they are victims of their moods, which repel people and repel business. We avoid morose, gloomy people, just as we avoid a picture which makes a disagreeable impression upon us. Everywhere we see people with great ambition doing very ordinary things, simply because there are so many days when they do not feel like it, or when they are discouraged or blue. A man who is at the mercy of a capricious disposition can never be a leader, a power among men. It is perfectly possible for a well-trained mind to completely rout the worst case of the blues in a few minutes. But the trouble with most of us is that instead of flinging open the mental blinds and letting in the sun of cheerfulness, hope, and optimism, we keep them closed and try to eject the darkness by main force. The art of arts is learning how to clear the mind of its enemies, enemies of our comfort, happiness, and success. It is a great thing to learn to focus the mind upon the beautiful instead of the ugly, the true instead of the false, upon harmony instead of discord, life instead of death, health instead of disease. This is not always easy, but it is possible to everybody. It requires only skillful thinking, the forming of the right thought habits. The best way to keep out darkness is to keep the life filled with light. To keep out discord, keep it filled with harmony. To shut out error, keep the mind filled with truth. To shut out ugliness, contemplate beauty and loveliness. To get rid of all that is sour and unwholesome, contemplate all that is sweet and wholesome. Opposite thoughts cannot occupy the mind at the same time. No matter whether you feel like it or not, just affirm that you must feel like it, that you will feel like it, that you do feel like it, that you are normal, and that you are in a position to do your best. Say it deliberately, affirm it vigorously, and it will come true. The next time you get into trouble or are discouraged and think you are a failure, just try the experiment of affirming vigorously, persistently, that all that is real must be good, for God made all that is, and whatever doesn't seem to be good is not like its creator and therefore cannot be real. Persist in this affirmation. You will be surprised to see how unfortunate suggestions and adverse conditions will melt away before it. The next time you feel the blues or a fit of depression coming on, just get by yourself. If possible, after taking a good bath and dressing yourself becomingly, and give yourself a good talking to. Talk to yourself in the same dead in earnest way that you would talk to your own child, or a dear friend who was deep in the mire of despondency, suffering tortures from melancholy. Drive out the black, hideous pictures which haunt your mind. Sweep away all depressing thoughts, suggestions, all the rubbish that is troubling you. Let go of everything that is unpleasant, all the mistakes, all the disagreeable past. Just rise up in arms against the enemies of your peace and happiness. Summon all the force you can muster and drive them out. Resolve that no matter what happens, you are going to be happy, that you are going to enjoy yourself. When you look at it squarely, it is very foolish, almost criminal, to go about this beautiful world crowded with splendid opportunities and things to delight and cheer us, with a sad, dejected face, as though life had been a disappointment instead of a priceless boon. Just say to yourself, I am a man, and I am going to do the work of a man. It's right up to me, and I am going to face the situation. Do not let anybody or anything shake your faith that you can conquer all the enemies of your peace and happiness, and that you inherit an abundance of all that is good. We should early form the habit of erasing from the mind all disagreeable, unhealthy, death-dealing thoughts. We should start out every morning with a clean slate. We should blot out from our mental gallery all discordant pictures and replace them with the harmonious, uplifting, life-giving ones. The next time you feel jaded, discouraged, completely played out and blue, you will probably find, if you look for the reason, that your condition is largely due to exhausted vitality, either from overwork, overeating, or violating in some way the laws of digestion, or from vicious habits of some kind. The blues are often caused by exhausted nerve cells, due to overstraining work, long-continued excitement, or overstimulated nerves from dissipation. This condition is caused by the clamoring of exhausted nerve cells for nourishment, rest, or recreation. Multitudes of people suffer from despondency and melancholy as a result of a run-down condition physically, due to their irregular vicious habits and a lack of refreshing sleep. When you are feeling blue or discouraged, get as complete a change of environment as possible. Whatever you do, do not brood over your troubles or dwell upon the things which happen to annoy you at the time. Think the pleasantest, happiest things possible. Hold the most charitable, loving thoughts toward others. Make a strenuous effort to radiate joy and gladness to everybody about you. Say the kindest, pleasantest things. You will soon begin to feel a wonderful uplift. The shadows which darkened your mind will flee away, and the sun of joy will light up your whole being. Stoutly, confidently, everlastingly affirm that you will become what your ambitions indicate as fitting and possible. Do not say, I shall be a success sometime. Say, I am a success. Success is my birthright. Do not say that you are going to be happy in the future. Say to yourself, I was intended for happiness, made for it, and I am happy now. If, however, you affirm, I am health, I am prosperity, I am this or that, but do not believe it, you will not be helped by affirmation. You must believe what you affirm and try to realize it. Assert your actual possession of the things you need, of the qualities you long to have. Force your mind toward your goal. Hold it there steadily, persistently. For this is the mental state that creates. The negative mind, which doubts and wavers, creates nothing. I, myself, am good fortune, says Walt Whitman. If we could only realize that the very attitude of assuming that we are the real embodiment of the thing we long to be or to attain, that we possess the good things we long for, not that we possess all the qualities of good, but that we are these qualities, with the constant affirming, I, myself, am good luck, good fortune. I am, myself, a part of the great creative sustaining principle of the universe, because my real divine self and my Father are one. What a revolution would come to earth's toilers. End of chapter 44. The next time you think you are a failure. Chapter 45 of Pushing to the Front. Pushing to the Front by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 45. Stand for something. The greatest thing that can be said of a man, no matter how much he has achieved, is that he has kept his record clean. Why is it that, in spite of the ravages of time, the reputation of Lincoln grows larger and his character means more to the world every year? It is because he kept his record clean and never prostituted his ability, nor gambled with his reputation. Where in all history is there an example of a man who was merely rich, no matter how great his wealth, who exerted such a power for good, who was such a living force in civilization, as was this poor backwoods boy? What a powerful illustration of the fact that character is the greatest force in the world. A man assumes importance and becomes a power in the world just as soon as it is found that he stands for something, that he is not for sale, that he will not lease his manhood for salary, for any amount of money, or for any influence or position, that he will not lend his name to anything which he cannot endorse. The trouble with so many men today is that they do not stand for anything outside their vocation. They may be well educated, well up in their specialties, may have a lot of expert knowledge, but they cannot be depended upon. There is some flaw in them which takes the edge off their virtue. They may be fairly honest, but you cannot bank on them. It is not difficult to find a lawyer or a physician who knows a good deal, who is eminent in his profession. But it is not so easy to find one who is a man before he is a lawyer or a physician, whose name is a synonym for all that is clean, reliable, solid, substantial. It is not difficult to find a good preacher, but it is not so easy to find a real man, sterling manhood, back of the sermon. It is easy to find successful merchants, but not so easy to find men who put character above merchandise. What the world wants is men who have principle underlying their expertness, principle under their law, their medicine, their business, men who stand for something outside of their offices and stores, who stand for something in their community, whose very presence carries weight. Everywhere we see smart, clever, long-headed, shrewd men, but how comparatively rare it is to find one whose record is as clean as a hound's tooth, who will not swerve from the right, who would rather fail than be a party to a questionable transaction, Everywhere we see businessmen putting the stumbling blocks of deception and dishonest methods right across their own pathway, tripping themselves up while trying to deceive others. We see men worth millions of dollars, filled with terror, trembling lest investigations may uncover things which will damn them in the public estimation. We see them cowed before the law like whipped spaniels, catching at any straw that will save them from public disgrace. What a terrible thing to live in the limelight of popular favor, to be envied as rich and powerful, to be esteemed as honorable and straightforward, and yet to be conscious all the time of not being what the world thinks we are, to live in constant terror of discovery, in fear that something may happen to unmask us and show us up in our true light. But nothing can happen to injure seriously the man who lives foursquare to the world, who has nothing to cover up, nothing to hide from his fellows, who lives a transparent, clean life, with never a fear of disclosures. If all of his material possessions are swept away from him, he knows that he has a monument in the hearts of his countrymen, in the affection and admiration of the people, and that nothing can happen to harm his real self because he has kept his record clean. Mr. Roosevelt early resolved that, let what would come, whether he succeeded in what he undertook or failed, whether he made friends or enemies, he would not take chances with his good name. He would part with everything else first, that he would never gamble with his reputation, that he would keep his record clean. His first ambition was to stand for something, to be a man. Before he was a politician or anything else, the man must come first. In his early career he had many opportunities to make a great deal of money by allying himself with crooked, sneaking, unscrupulous politicians. He had all sorts of opportunities for political graft. But crookedness never had any attraction for him. He refused to be a party to any political jobbery, any underhand business. He preferred to lose any position he was seeking, to let somebody else have it, if he must get smirched in the getting it. He would not touch a dollar, place, or preferment unless it came to him clean, with no trace of jobbery on it. Politicians who had an axe to grind knew it was no use to try to bribe him or to influence him with promises of patronage, money, position, or power. Mr. Roosevelt knew perfectly well that he would make many mistakes and many enemies, but he resolved to carry himself in such a way that even his enemies should at least respect him for his honesty of purpose and for his straightforward, square-deal methods. He resolved to keep his record clean, his name white, at all hazards. Everything else seemed unimportant in comparison. In times like these, the world especially needs such men as Mr. Roosevelt, men who hew close to the chalk line of right and hold the line plumb to truth, men who do not pander to public favor, men who make duty and truth their goal and go straight to their mark, turning neither to the right nor to the left, though a paradise tempt them. Who can ever estimate how much his influence has done toward purging politics and elevating the American ideal? He has changed the viewpoint of many statesmen and politicians. He has shown them a new and a better way. He has made many of them ashamed of the old methods of grafting and selfish greed. He has held up a new ideal, showing them that unselfish service to their country is infinitely nobler than an ambition for self-aggrandizement. American patriotism has a higher meaning today because of the example of this great American. Many young politicians and statesmen have adopted cleaner methods and higher aims because of his influence. There is no doubt that tens of thousands of young men in this country are cleaner in their lives and more honest and ambitious to be good citizens, because here is a man who always stands for the square deal, for civic righteousness, for American manhood. Every man ought to feel that there is something in him that bribery cannot touch, that influence cannot buy, something that is not for sale, something he would not sacrifice or tamper with for any price, something he would give his life for if necessary. If a man stands for something worthwhile, compels recognition for himself alone, on account of his real worth, he is not dependent upon recommendations, upon fine clothes, a fine house, or a pull. He is his own best recommendation. The young man who starts out with a resolution to make his character his capital, and to pledge his whole manhood for every obligation he enters into, will not be a failure, though he wins neither fame nor fortune. No man ever really does a great thing who loses his character in the process. No substitute has ever been discovered for honesty. Multitudes of people have gone to the wall trying to find one. Our prisons are full of people who have attempted to substitute something else for it. No man can really believe in himself when he is occupying a false position and wearing a mask, when the little monitor within him is constantly saying, "You know you are a fraud. You are not the man you pretend to be." The consciousness of not being genuine, not being what others think him to be, robs a man of power, honeycombs the character, and destroys self-respect and self-confidence. When Lincoln was asked to take the wrong side of a case, he said, "I could not do it. All the time while talking to that jury, I should be thinking, 'Lincoln, you're a liar, you're a liar,' and believe I should forget myself and say it loud." Character as capital is very much underestimated by a great number of young men. They seem to put more emphasis upon smartness, shrewdness, long-headedness, cunning, influence, a pull, than upon downright honesty and integrity of character. Yet why do scores of concerns pay enormous sums for the use of the name of a man who, perhaps, has been dead for half a century or more? It is because there is power in that name, because there is character in it, because it stands for something, because it represents reliability and square dealing. Think of what the name of Tiffany, of Park, and Tilford, or any of the great names which stand in the commercial world as solid and immovable as the rock of Gibraltar are worth. Does it not seem strange that young men who know these facts should try to build up a business on a foundation of cunning, scheming, and trickery, instead of building on the solid rock of character, reliability, and manhood? Is it not remarkable that so many men should work so hard to establish a business on an unreliable, flimsy foundation, instead of building upon the solid masonry of honest goods, square dealing, reliability? A name is worth everything until it is questioned, but when suspicion clings to it, it is worth nothing. There is nothing in this world that will take the place of character. There is no policy in the world, to say nothing of the right or wrong of it, that compares with honesty and square dealing. In spite of, or because of, all the crookedness and dishonesty that is being uncovered, of all the scoundrels that are being unmasked, integrity is the biggest word in the business world today. There never was a time in all history when it was so big, and it is growing bigger. There never was a time when character meant so much in business, when it stood for so much everywhere as it does today. There was a time when the man who was the shrewdest and sharpest and cunningest in taking advantage of others got the biggest salary. But today, the man at the other end of the bargain is looming up as never before. Nathan Strauss, when asked the secret of the great success of his firm, said it was their treatment of the man at the other end of the bargain. He said they could not afford to make enemies. They could not afford to displease or to take advantage of customers, or to give them reason to think that they had been unfairly dealt with. That, in the long run, the man who gave the squarest deal to the man at the other end of the bargain would get ahead fastest. There are merchants who have made great fortunes, but who do not carry weight among their fellow men because they have dealt all their lives with inferiority. They have lived with shoddy and shams so long that the suggestion has been held in their minds until their whole standards of life have been lowered, their ideals have shrunken, their characters have partaken of the quality of their business. Contrast these men with the men who stood for half a century or more at the head of solid houses, substantial institutions, men who have always stood for quality in everything, who have surrounded themselves not only with ability, but with men and women of character. We instinctively believe in character. We admire people who stand for something, who are centered in truth and honesty. It is not necessary that they agree with us. We admire them for their strength, the honesty of their opinions, the inflexibility of their principles. The late Carl Schurz was a strong man and antagonized many people. He changed his political views very often, but even his worst enemies knew that there was one thing he would never go back on, friends or no friends, party or no party, and that was his devotion to principle as he saw it. There was no parleying with his convictions. He could stand alone, if necessary, with all the world against him. His inconsistencies, his many changes in parties and politics, could not destroy the universal admiration for the man who stood for his convictions. Although he escaped from a German prison and fled his country, where he had been arrested on account of his revolutionary principles when but a mere youth, Emperor William I had such a profound respect for his honesty of purpose and his strength of character that he invited him to return to Germany and visit him, gave him a public dinner, and paid him great tribute. Who can estimate the influence of President Eliot in enriching and uplifting our national ideas and standards through the thousands of students who go out from Harvard University? The tremendous force and nobility of character of Phillips Brooks raised everyone who came within his influence to higher levels. His great earnestness in trying to lead people up to his lofty ideals swept everything before it. One could not help feeling, while listening to him and watching him, that there was a mighty triumph of character, a grand expression of superb manhood. Such men as these increase our faith in the race, in the possibilities of the grandeur of the coming man. We are proud of our country because of such standards. It is the ideal that determines the direction of the life. And what a grand sight, what an inspiration are those men who sacrifice the dollar to the ideal. The principles by which the problem of success is solved are right and justice, honesty and integrity, and just in proportion as a man deviates from these principles, he falls short of solving his problem. It is true that he may reach something. He may get money. But is that success? The thief gets money. But does he succeed? Is it any honester to steal by means of a long head than by means of a long arm? It is very much more dishonest, because the victim is deceived and then robbed, a double crime. We often receive letters which read like this: I am getting a good salary, but I do not feel right about it somehow. I cannot still the voice within me that says, wrong, wrong, to what I am doing. Leave it, we always say to the writers of these letters. Do not stay in a questionable occupation, no matter what inducement it offers. Its false light will land you on the rocks if you follow it. It is demoralizing to the mental faculties, paralyzing to the character, to do a thing which one's conscience forbids. Tell the employer who expects you to do questionable things that you cannot work for him unless you can put the trademark of your manhood, the stamp of your integrity, upon everything you do. Tell him that if the highest thing in you cannot bring success, surely the lowest cannot. You cannot afford to sell the best thing in you, your honor, your manhood, to a dishonest man or a lying institution. You should regard even the suggestion that you might sell out for a consideration as an insult. Resolve that you will not be paid for being something less than a man, that you will not lease your ability, your education, your inventiveness, your self-respect for salary to do a man's lying for him, either in writing advertisements, selling goods, or in any other capacity. Resolve that, whatever your vocation, you are going to stand for something, that you are not going to be merely a lawyer, a physician, a merchant, a clerk, a farmer, a congressman, or a man who carries a big money bag, that you are going to be a man first, last, and all the time. End of chapter 45. Chapter 46 of Pushing to the Front by Orison Swett Marden. Chapter 46. Nature's Little Bill. Though the mills of God grind slowly, yet they grind exceedingly small. Though with patience he stands waiting, with exactness grinds he all. Frederick von Legau. Because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Ecclesiastes. Man is a watch, wound up at first but never wound up again. Once down, he's down forever. Herrick. Old age seizes upon an ill-spent youth like fire upon a rotten house. South. Last Sunday a young man died here of extreme old age at 25. John Newton. If you will not hear reason, she'll surely rap your knuckles. Poor Richard sayings. "Oh, ah!" exclaimed Franklin. "What have I done to merit these cruel sufferings?" "Many things," replied the gout. "You have eaten and drunk too freely, and too much indulged those legs of yours in your indolence. Nature seldom presents her bill on the day you violate her laws. But if you overdraw your account at her bank and give her a mortgage on your body, be sure she will foreclose. She may loan you all you want, but, like Shylock, she will demand the last ounce of flesh. She rarely brings her cancer bill before the victim is 40 years old. She does not often annoy a man with her drink bill until he is past his prime, and then presents it in the form of Bright's disease, fatty degeneration of the heart, drunkard's liver, or some similar disease. What you pay the saloon keeper is but a small part of your score. We often hear it said that the age of miracles is past. We marvel that a thief dying on the cross should appear that very day in paradise. But behold, how that bit of meat or vegetable on a Hawarden breakfast table is snatched from death, transformed into thought, and on the following night shakes Parliament in the magnetism and oratory of a Gladstone. The age of miracles past, when 3 times a day right before our eyes, nature performs miracles greater even than raising the dead. Watch that crust of bread thrown into a cell in Bedford jail and devoured by a poor, hungry tinker. Cut, crushed, ground, driven by muscles, dissolved by acids and alkalis, absorbed and hurled into the mysterious red river of life. Scores of little factories along this strange stream, waiting for this crust, transmute it as it passes, as if by magic, here into a bone cell, there into gastric juice, here into bile, there into a nerve cell, yonder into a brain cell. We cannot trace the processes by which this crust arrives at the muscle and acts, arrives at the brain and thinks. We cannot see the manipulating hand which throws back and forth the shuttle which weaves Bunyan's destinies, nor can we trace the subtle alchemy which transforms this prison crust into the finest allegory in the world, the Pilgrim's Progress. But we do know that, unless we supply food when the stomach begs and clamors, brain and muscle cannot continue to act. And we also know that unless the food is properly chosen, unless we eat it properly, unless we maintain good digestion by exercise of mind and body, it will not produce the speeches of a Gladstone or the allegories of a Bunyan. Truly we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Imagine a cistern which would transform the foul sewage of a city into pure drinking water in a second's time, as the black venous blood, fouled with the ashes of burned up brain cells and debris of worn out tissues, is transformed in the lungs, at every breath, into pure, bright red blood. Each drop of blood from that magic stream of liquid life was compounded by a divine chemist. In it float all our success and destiny. In it are the extensions and limits of our possibilities. In it are health and long life, or disease and premature death. In it are our hopes and our fears, our courage, our cowardice, our energy or lassitude, our strength or weakness, our success or failure. In it are susceptibilities of high or broad culture, or pinched or narrow faculties, handed down from an uncultured ancestry. From it our bones and nerves, our muscles and brain, our comeliness or ugliness, all come. In it are locked up the elements of a vicious or a gentle life, the tendency of a criminal or a saint. How important is it, then, that we should obey the laws of health, and thus maintain the purity and power of this our earthly river of life? We hear a great deal about the vile body, said Spencer, and many are encouraged by the phrase to transgress the laws of health. But nature quietly suppresses those who treat thus disrespectfully one of her highest products, and leaves the world to be peopled by the descendants of those who are not so foolish. Nature gives to him that hath. She shows him the contents of her vast storehouse, and bids him take all he wants and be welcome. But she will not let him keep for years what he does not use. Use or lose is her motto. Every atom we do not utilize this great economist snatches from us. If you put your arm in a sling and do not use it, nature will remove the muscle almost to the bone, and the arm will become useless. But in exact proportion to your efforts to use it again, she will gradually restore what she took away. Put your mind in the sling of idleness or inactivity, and in like manner she will remove your brain, even to imbecility. The blacksmith wants one powerful arm, and she gives it to him, but reduces the other. You can, if you will, send all the energy of your life into some one faculty, but all your other faculties will starve. A young lady may wear tight corsets if she chooses, but nature will remove the rose from her cheek and put pallor there. She will replace a clear complexion with muddy hues and sallow spots. She will take away the elastic step, the luster from the eye. Don't expect to have health for nothing. Nothing in this world worth anything can be had for nothing. Health is the prize of a constant struggle. Nature passes no act without affixing a penalty for its violation. Whenever she is outraged, she will have her penalty, although it take a life. A great surgeon stood before his class to perform a certain operation which the elaborate mechanism and minute knowledge of modern science had only recently made possible. With strong and gentle hand he did his work successfully so far as his part of the terrible business went, and then he turned to his pupils and said, 2 years ago a safe and simple operation might have cured this disease. 6 years ago a wise way of life might have prevented it. We have done our best as the case now stands, but nature will have her word to say. She does not always consent to the repeal of her capital sentences. Next day, the patient died. Apart from accidents, we hold our life largely at will. What business have 75,000 physicians in the United States? It is our own fault that even 1/10 of them get a respectable living. What a commentary upon our modern American civilization that 350,000 people in this country die annually from absolutely preventable diseases. Seneca said, "The gods have given us a long life, but we have made it short." Few people know enough to become old. It is a rare thing for a person to die of old age. Only 3 or 4 out of 100 die of anything like old age. But nature evidently intended, by the wonderful mechanism of the human body, that we should live well up to a century. Thomas Parr of England lived to the age of 152 years. He was married when he was 120, and did not leave off work until he was 130. The great Dr. Harvey examined Parr's body, but found no cause of death except a change of living. Henry Jenkins of Yorkshire, England, lived to be 169, and would probably have lived longer had not the king brought him to London, where luxuries hastened his death. The court records of England show that he was a witness in a trial 140 years before his death. He swam across a rapid river when he was 100. There is nothing we are more ignorant of than the physiology and chemistry of the human body. Not one person in 1,000 can correctly locate important internal organs or describe their use in the animal economy. What an insult to the Creator who fashioned them so wonderfully and fearfully in His own image, that the graduates from our high schools and even universities, and young women who finish their education, become proficient in the languages, in music, in art, and have the culture of travel, but cannot describe or locate the various organs or functions upon which their lives depend. The time will come, says Francis Willard, when it will be told as a relic of our primitive barbarism that children were taught the list of prepositions and the names of the rivers of Tibet, but were not taught the wonderful laws on which their own bodily happiness is based, and the humanities by which they could live in peace and goodwill with those about them. Nothing else is so important to man as the study and knowledge of himself, and yet he knows less of himself than he does of the beasts about him. The human body is the great poem of the great author. Not to learn how to read it, to spell out its meaning, to appreciate its beauties, or to attempt to fathom its mysteries, is a disgrace to our civilization. What a price mortals pay for their ignorance! Let a dwarfed, half-developed, one-sided, short-lived nation answer. A brilliant intellect in a sickly body is like gold in a spent swimmer's pocket. Often, from lack of exercise, one side of the brain gradually becomes paralyzed and deteriorates into imbecility. How intimately the functions of the nervous organs are united! The whole man mourns for a felon. The least swelling presses a nerve against a bone and causes one intense agony, and even a Napoleon becomes a child. A corn on the toe, an affection of the kidneys or of the liver, a boil anywhere on the body, or a carbuncle, may seriously affect the eyes and even the brain. The whole system is a network of nerves, of organs, of functions, which are so intimately joined and related in such close sympathy that an injury to one part is immediately felt in every other. Nature takes note of all our transactions, physical, mental, or moral, and places every item promptly to our debit or credit. Let us take a look at a page in Nature's ledger. To damage to the heart in youth by immoderate athletics, tobacco chewing, cigarette smoking, drinking strong tea or coffee, rowing, running to trains, overstudy, excitement, etc. The irritable heart, the tobacco heart, a life of promise impaired or blighted. To one digestive apparatus ruined by eating hurriedly, by eating unsuitable or poorly cooked food, by drinking ice water when one is heated, by swallowing scalding drinks, especially tea, which forms tannic acid on the delicate lining of the stomach, or by eating when tired or worried, or after receiving bad news, when the gastric juice cannot be secreted, etc. Dyspepsia, melancholia, years of misery to self, anxiety to one's family, pity and disgust of friends. To one nervous system shattered by dissipation, abuses, overexcitement, a fast life, feverish haste to get riches or fame, hastening puberty by stimulating food, exciting life, etc. Years of weakness, disappointed ambition, hopeless inefficiency, a burnt-out life. to damage by undue mental exertion by burning the midnight oil, exhausting the brain cells faster than they can be renewed. Impaired powers of mind, softening of the brain, blighted hopes. To overstraining the brain, trying to lead his class in college, trying to take a prize, or to get ahead of somebody else. A disappointed ambition, a life of invalidism. To hardening the delicate and sensitive gray matter of the brain and nerves, and ruining the lining membranes of the stomach and nervous system by alcohol, opium, etc. A hardened brain, a hardened conscience, a ruined home, Bright's disease, fatty degeneration, nervous degeneration, a short, useless, wasted life. By forced balances here and there, accounts closed, physiological and moral bankruptcy. Sometimes 2 or 3 such items are charged to a single account. To offset them, there is placed on the credit side a little feverish excitement, too fleeting for calm enjoyment, followed by regret, remorse, and shame. Be sure your sins will find you out. They are all recorded. The gods are just, and of our pleasant vices make instruments to scourge us. It is a wonder that we live at all. We violate every law of our being, yet we expect to live to a ripe old age. What would you think of a man who, having an elegant watch, delicately adjusted to heat and cold, should leave it on the sidewalk, with cases open, on a dusty or a rainy day, and yet expect it to keep good time? What would you think of a householder who should leave the doors and windows of his mansion open to thieves and tramps, to winds and dust and rain? What are our bodies but timepieces made by an infinite hand, wound up to run a century, and so delicately adjusted to heat and cold that the temperature will not vary half a degree between the heat of summer and the cold of winter, whether we live in the regions of eternal frost or under the burning sun of the tropics. A particle of dust or the slightest friction will throw this wonderful timepiece out of order, yet we often leave it exposed to all the corroding elements. We do not always keep open the 25 miles of ventilating pores in the skin by frequent bathing. We seldom lubricate the delicate wheels of the body with the oil of gladness. We expose it to dust and cinders, cold and draughts, and poisonous gases. How careful we are to filter our water, air our beds, ventilate our sleeping rooms, and analyze our milk. We shrink from contact with filth and disease, but we put paper colored with arsenic on our walls and daily breathe its poisonous exhalations. We frequent theaters crowded with human beings, many of whom are uncleanly and diseased. We sit for hours and breathe in upon 1,400 square feet of lung tissue the heated, foul, and heavy air, carbonic acid gas from hundreds of gas burners, each consuming as much oxygen as 6 people, air filled with shreds of tissue expelled from diseased lungs, poisonous effluvia exhaled from the bodies of people who rarely bathe, from clothing seldom washed, fetid breaths, and skin disease in various stages of development. For hours we sit in this bath of poison and wonder at our headache and lassitude next morning. We pour a glass of ice water into a stomach busy in the delicate operation of digestion, ignorant or careless of the fact that it takes half an hour to recover from the shock and get the temperature back to 98 degrees, so that the stomach can go on secreting gastric juice. Then down goes another glass of water, with similar results. We pour down alcohol which thickens the velvety lining of the stomach and hardens the soft tissues, the thin sheaths of nerves, and the gray matter of the brain. We crowd meats, vegetables, pastry, confectionery, nuts, raisins, wines, fruits, etc., into one of the most delicately constructed organs of the body, and expect it to take care of its miscellaneously incongruous load without a murmur. After all these abuses, we do not give the blood a chance to go to the stomach and help it out of its misery, but summon it to the brain and muscles, notwithstanding the fact that it is so important to have an extra supply to aid digestion, that nature has made the blood vessels of the alimentary canal large enough to contain several times the amount in the entire body. Whoever saw a horse leave his oats and hay, when hungry, to wash them down with water? The dumb beasts can teach us some valuable lessons in eating and drinking. Nature mixes our gastric juice or pepsin and acids in just the right proportion to digest our food, and keep it at exactly the right temperature. If we dilute it, or lower its temperature by ice water, we diminish its solvent or digestive power, and dyspepsia is the natural result. English factory children have received the commiseration of the world because they were scourged to work 14 hours out of the 24. But there is many a theoretical republican who is a harsher taskmaster to his stomach than this, who allows it no more resting time than he does his watch, who gives it no Sunday, no holiday, no vacation in any sense, and who seeks to make his heart beat faster for the sake of the exhilaration he can thus produce. Although the heart weighs a little over half a pound, yet it pumps 18 pounds of blood from itself, forcing it into every nook and corner of the entire body back to itself in less than 2 minutes. This little organ, the most perfect engine in the world, does a daily work equal to lifting 124 tons 1 foot high, and exerts 1/3 as much muscle power as does a stout man at hard labor. If the heart should expend its entire force lifting its own weight, it would raise itself nearly 20,000 feet an hour, 10 times as high as a pedestrian can lift himself in ascending a mountain. What folly, then, to goad this willing, hard-working slave to greater exertions by stimulants! We must pay the penalty of our vocations. Beware of work that kills the workman. Those who prize long life should avoid all occupations which compel them to breathe impure air or deleterious gases, and especially those in which they are obliged to inhale dust and filings from steel and brass and iron, the dust in coal mines, and dust from threshing machines. Stone cutters, miners, and steel grinders are short-lived, the sharp particles of dust irritating and inflaming the tender lining of the lung cells. The knife and fork grinders in Manchester, England, rarely live beyond 32 years. Those who work in grain elevators and those who are compelled to breathe chemical poisons are short-lived. Deep breathing in dusty places sends the particles of dust into the upper and less used lobes of the lungs, and these become a constant irritant until they finally excite an inflammation, which may end in consumption. All occupations in which arsenic is used shorten life. Dr. William Ogle, who is authority upon this subject, says, "Of all the various influences that tend to produce differences of mortality in any community, none is more potent than the character of the prevailing occupations. Finding that clergymen and priests have the lowest death rate, he represented it as 100, and by comparison found that the rate for inn and hotel servants was 397. Miners, 331. Earthenware makers, 317. File makers, 300. Innkeepers, 274. Gardeners, farmers, and agricultural laborers, closely approximating the clerical standard. He gave as the causes of high mortality: first, working in a cramped or constrained attitude; second, exposure to the action of poisonous or irritating substances; third, excessive work, mental or physical; fourth, working in confined or foul air; fifth, the use of strong drink; sixth, differences in liability to fatal accidents; seventh, exposure to the inhalation of dust. The deaths of those engaged in alcoholic industries were as 1,521 to 1,000 of the average of all trades. It is very important that occupations should be congenial. Whenever our work galls us, whenever we feel it to be a drudgery and uncongenial, the friction grinds life away at a terrible rate. Health can be accumulated, invested, and made to yield its compound interest, and thus be doubled and redoubled. The capital of health may indeed be forfeited by one misdemeanor, as a rich man may sink all his property in one bad speculation, but it is as capable of being increased as any other kind of capital. One is inclined to think, with a recent writer, that it looks as if the rich men kept out of the kingdom of heaven were also excluded from the kingdom of brains. In New York, Boston, Philadelphia, and Chicago are thousands of millionaires, some of them running through 3 or 4 generations of fortune, and yet in all their ranks there is seldom a man possessed of the higher intellectual qualities that flower in literature, eloquence, or statesmanship. Scarcely one of them has produced a book worth printing, a poem worth reading, or a speech worth listening to. They are struck with intellectual sterility. They go to college, they travel abroad, they hire the dearest masters, they keep libraries among their furniture, and some of them buy works of art. But for all that, their brains wither under luxury, often by their own vices or tomfooleries, and mental barrenness is the result. He who violates nature's law must suffer the penalty, though he have millions. The fruits of intellect do not grow among the indolent rich. They are usually out of the republic of brains. Work or starve is nature's motto. Starve mentally, starve morally, even if you are rich enough to prevent physical starvation. How heavy a bill nature collects of him in whom the sexual instinct has been permitted to taint the whole life with illicit thoughts and deeds, stultifying the intellect, deadening the sensibilities, dwarfing the soul. I waive the quantum of the sin, the hazard of concealing, but it hardens all within, and petrifies the feeling. The sense of fatigue is one of nature's many signals of danger. All we accomplish by stimulating or crowding the body or mind when tired is worse than lost. Insomnia, and sometimes even insanity, is nature's penalty for prolonged loss of sleep. One of the worst tortures of the Inquisition was that of keeping victims from sleeping, often driving them to insanity or death. Melancholy follows insomnia. Insanity, both. To keep us in a healthy condition, nature takes us back to herself, puts us under the ether of sleep, and keeps us there nearly 1/3 of our lives, while she overhauls and repairs in secret our wonderful mechanism. She takes us back each night wasted and dusty from the day's work, broken, scarred, and injured in the great struggle of life. Each cell of the brain is reburnished and refreshened. All the ashes or waste from the combustion of the tissues is washed out into the bloodstream, pumped to the lungs, and thrown out in the breath, and the body is returned in the morning as fresh and good as new. The American honey does not always pay for the sting. Labor is the eternal condition on which the rich man gains an appetite for his dinner, and the poor man a dinner for his appetite. But the habit of constant, perpetual industry often becomes a disease. In the Norse legend, Alfheida was not allowed to drink from Mirmir's spring, the fount of wisdom, until he had left his eye as a pledge. Scholars often leave their health, their happiness, their usefulness behind, in their great eagerness to drink deep draughts at wisdom's fountain. Professional men often sacrifice everything that is valuable in life for the sake of reputation, influence, and money. Businessmen sacrifice home, family, health, happiness in the great struggle for money and power. The American prize, like the pearl in the oyster, is very attractive, but is too often the result of disease. Charles Linnaeus, the great naturalist, so exhausted his brain by overexertion that he could not recognize his own work and even forgot his own name. Kirk White won the prize at Cambridge, but it cost him his life. He studied at night and forced his brain by stimulants and narcotics in his endeavor to pull through, but he died at 24. Paley died at 62 of overwork. He was called one of the sublimest spirits in the world. President Timothy Dwight of Yale College nearly killed himself by overwork when a young man. When at Yale, he studied 9 hours, taught 6 hours a day, and took no exercise whatsoever. He could not be induced to stop until he became so nervous and irritable that he was unable to look at a book 10 minutes a day. His mind gave way, and it was a long time before he fully recovered. Imagine the surprise of the angels at the death of men and women in the early prime and vigor of life. Could we but read the notes of their autopsies, we might say less of mysterious providence at funerals. They would run somewhat as follows. Notes from the angels' autopsies. What, is it returned so soon? A body framed for a century's use, returned at 30. A temple which was 28 years in building, destroyed almost before it was completed. What have gray hairs, wrinkles, a bent form, and death to do with youth? Has all this beauty perished like a bud just bursting into bloom, plucked by the grim destroyer? Has she fallen a victim to tight-lacing, over-excitement, and the gaiety and frivolity of fashionable life? Here is an educated, refined woman who died of lung starvation. What a tax human beings pay for breathing impure air! Nature provides them with a tonic atmosphere, compounded by the divine chemist, but they refuse to breathe it in its purity, and so must pay the penalty in shortened lives. They can live a long time without water, a longer time without food, clothing, or the so-called comforts of life. They can live without education or culture, but their lungs must have good, healthful air, food 24,000 times a day, if they would maintain health. Oh, that they would see, as we do, the intimate connection between bad air, bad morals, and a tendency to crime. Here are the ruins of an idolized son and loving husband. Educated and refined, what infinite possibilities beckoned him onward at the beginning of his career! But the devil's agent offered him imagination, sprightliness, wit, eloquence, bodily strength, and happiness in eau de vie, or water of life, as he called it, at only 15 cents a glass. The best of our company tried to dissuade him, but to no avail. The poor mortal closed his bargain with the dram seller. And what did he get? A hardened conscience, a ruined home, a diseased body, a muddled brain, a heartbroken wife, wretched children, disappointed friends, triumphant enemies, days of remorse, nights of anguish, an unwept deathbed, an unhonored grave. And only to think that he is only one of many thousands. What fools these mortals be! Did he not see the destruction towards which he was rushing with all the feverish haste of slavish appetite? Ah, yes, but only when it was too late. In his clenched hand, as he lay dead, was found a crumpled paper containing the following, in lines barely legible, so tremulous were the nerves of the writer: "Wife, children, and over $40,000, all gone. I alone am responsible. All has gone down my throat. When I was 21 I had a fortune. I am not yet 35 years old. I have killed my beautiful wife, who died of a broken heart, have murdered our children with neglect. When this coin is gone, I do not know how I can get my next meal. I shall die a drunken pauper. This is my last money, and my history. If this bill comes into the hands of any man who drinks, let him take warning from my life's ruin." What a magnificent specimen of manhood this would have been if his life had been under the rule of reason, not passion. He dies of old age at 40. His hair is gray, his eyes are sunken, his complexion sodden, his body marked with the labels of his disease. A physique fit for a god, fashioned in the Creator's image with infinite possibilities. A physiological hulk, wrecked on passion's seas, and fit only for a danger signal to warn the race. What would parents think of a captain who would leave his son in charge of a ship without giving him any instructions or chart showing the rocks, reefs, and shoals? Do they not know that those who sleep in the ocean are but a handful compared with those who have foundered on passion's seas? Oh, the sins of silence which parents commit against those dearer to them than life itself! Youth cannot understand the great solicitude of parents regarding their education, their associations, their welfare generally, and the mysterious silence in regard to their physical natures. An intelligent explanation by all mothers to the daughters, and by all fathers to the sons, of the mysteries of their physical lives, when at the right age, would revolutionize civilization. This young clergyman killed himself trying to be popular. This student committed suicide by exhausting his brain in trying to lead his class. This young lawyer overdrew his account at Nature's bank, and she foreclosed by a stroke of paralysis. This merchant died at 35 by his own hand. His life was slipping away without enjoyment. He had murdered his capacity for happiness, and dug his own spiritual grave while making preparations for enjoying life. This young society man died of nothing to do and dissipation at 30. What a miserable farce the life of men and women seems to us. Time, which is so precious that even the Creator will not give a second moment until the first is gone, they throw away as though it were water. Opportunities which angels covet, they fling away as of no consequence, and die of failures because they have no chance in life. Life, which seems so precious to us, they spurn as if but a bauble. Scarcely a mortal returns to us who has not robbed himself of years of precious life. Scarcely a man returns to us, dropping off in genuine old age, as autumn leaves drop in the forest. Has life become so cheap that mortals thus throw it away? End of chapter 46. Nature's Little Bill.